Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Ruchi Dubey Chaturvedi, Associate Professor at Jai Hind College, which is affiliated to University of Mumbai. Today we are going to learn two very common aspects which we encounter in our life, psychological concepts which are frustration and conflicts. Our learning objectives is going to be to explain the concept and cycle of frustration, to understand the sources and consequences of frustration, explain the concept of conflicts and the changing perspectives regarding conflicts, describe the informal conflict management techniques, also discuss the process of negotiation as a formal conflict management technique. When you talk about frustration, and to understand it conceptually, let's first define it. Frustration is a chronic sense of insecurity, discouragement, dissatisfaction which arises whenever some desires, motives are there, we have inner conflicts or there are some unresolved conflicts. When you talk about a very famous psychologist called Freud, he described frustration as an unpleasant feeling which arises whenever a pleasure seeking or a pain avoiding behavior is blocked. What are the basic connotations of frustration? What does it imply to us when we talk about frustration? Frustration means whenever there is a goal oriented behavior and for some reasons it is interfered with or delayed or it is met with obstacles. Now these barriers and obstacles which come in the way of frustration can come from within an individual, that means something the person is himself doing which is bringing about the obstructions, or they can also come from the external environment around the person, that is the physical environment around the person. Frustration always gives rise to an unpleasant emotional state which results from these blocked goal seeking behavior. Now the responses to the frustration situation will determine the adequacy of a person's life adjustment. That means how well a person adjusts to his life will depend on how he tackles the frustration of his life. Whenever frustration happens, basically the person it undergoes three stages. The first is a goal, motive and a drive state. It gives rise to a stage 2 which is a motivated drive state or little bit of a action oriented stage. And the stage 3 is the stage where the person actually enacts behavior. Now whenever the movement from stage 2 to stage 3 starts getting blocked, that means there is an inner motivated desirable state inside the person to do something. However, the person is not able to fulfill the commitment and do a pain seeking or a pain avoiding or a pleasure seeking behavior, then it gives rise to certain frustration. Let's now try to understand the sources of frustration. The sources of frustration can be any. The first which we are going to see is the approach type of a situation where the person has two desirable goals which he wants to approach simultaneously, but the person has to make a choice which goal is more desirable. This could result in frustration for a person. So even though two goals are desirable, but the choice has to be made of selecting only one goal. The other could be a situation where there is a goal, there is a desirable goal, but how to approach a goal, the person is not able to decide on how, which means there are many paths towards goal achievement, but the person is unable to decide which path is the ideal path to be taken for goal achievement. Now coming to the third source, which is approach avoidance kind of a conflict. This is a situation where there is a single goal. There are some components of the goal which are desirable, some components of the goal which are undesirable. So the person is not able to decide whether the individual should approach a goal or should a person avoid the goal. This can also result in frustrating feelings for an individual. Coming down to the next source of frustration, we come to a situation of avoidance conflict. In avoidance conflict, there are two highly undesirable goals which the individual faces. Simultaneously, he wants to avoid both undesirable goals, but unfortunately, He has to choose one goal which he has to approach and only one which he can avoid. So, one undesirable goal has to be selected by an individual, which can again result in frustration for that particular person. The other aspect and another cause of frustration could be intrapersonal conflicts. Whenever we talk of a word called intrapersonal, it means within an individual. So, the person is facing some kind of a dilemma, some kind of confusion, some kind of disharmony within himself. And this can also result in a highly frustrating feeling for the person. Now, in a nutshell, you can say these are the broad categories which could be taken as the causal factors or the situations which can result in frustration for an individual. The next concept of frustration which we are going to deal is what are the consequences if such a frustration situation prolongs for a very long time in an individual's life. In terms of the broad categories of consequences, you can put them under biological, you can put them under psychological problems, you can also put them under social consequences. First, let us handle the biological aspect. So, if an individual endures with frustration situation for a very long time, how is his body physiology or biology going to be affected by it? There are various impairments which can happen to the body, which are commonly seen nowadays, which is heart diseases, respiratory problems, digestive problems. All these will result in a decrease in body's immunity system. Sleep disturbances will follow it, and a person can also develop lifelong problems like asthma, ulcer, cancer, allergy. This is the way the body is reacting to frustration. Coming down to the mental or psychological problems which can happen in a person if this kind of a frustration situation stays for a very long time. Again, multiple psychological problems can happen to a person. He experiences dissatisfaction, disinterest, boredom, anxiety, tension, depression. There is a decrease in the person's efficiency, whether you see him working at home or he is working at his workplace. This will decline the person's self-confidence and his self-esteem. Mood swings are very common. An inappropriate affective state which implies that now the type of emotion and the intensity of emotion which an individual is exhibiting, showing, is not appropriate to the situation or to the other side. That means something is going wrong with his emotional state. Come down to the third consequences, which is the social effects on the person. Now, when such a person who is facing continuous frustration is interacting with others, whether it could be family members, people around in the neighborhood, his community or at work, he is showing impairments. There are poor interpersonal communication at home and work, which is a social factor. These people are very prone to start abusing certain substances, whether it is alcohol, whether it is cigarette smoking, nicotine, or it could be any form of drugs. There are also chances that these people, such individuals, start indulging in delinquent behaviors or what we call as antisocial behavior. This is regarding whatever we could understand in a nutshell about frustration. Now we come to the next psychological concept, which is called as conflicts. Conflicts, if you see the definition, has to be understood at two levels. One is conflict happening at the intrapersonal level, which means that something is happening within an individual where his value system, his motives, his desires, needs, his aspirations are conflicting with each other. That means there is no involvement of any other person, but inner turmoil and inner confusion is happening within an individual itself. This is what you call as conflicts at intrapersonal level. The second aspect of conflict is when conflicts happen at interpersonal level, which is a place, which is a time also where the person starts conflicting with some other people around him. That means suddenly a person might realize that whatever he wants to do in life, there is someone or many people around him which are trying to negatively and adversely affect his goal orientation, his aspirations. Both the situation, whether the conflicts are happening at an intrapersonal level or they are happening at interpersonal level, both of them are undesirable situations. To understand conflicts, we also have to go back couple of decades back to understand how the understanding of conflicts have undergone a change over years and decades. So, we see the changing perspectives regarding conflicts. The first perspective dealing with conflicts was the traditional viewpoint. Now, the traditional viewpoint considered all kinds of conflicts to be dysfunctional, detrimental and completely harmful and undesirable. So, the concept was that if conflicts is happening within an individual, between people, whether it is happening within a family or a community or at a workplace, it is highly undesirable. So, the basic advice was that whatever kind of conflicts you see happening, just handle that conflict and try to abort it at the earliest, because it will be disruptive and dysfunctional in the long run. This was what was considered to be the traditional aspect. Slow, and they say, why does it happen? They say it could happen because of poor communication between people, lack of trust between people and openness also, failure of one person to fulfill the demands and expectation of the other person. There could be some unresolved issues, instinct, desires within an individual. Now, after this viewpoint became very famous couple of decades back, it was replaced by a quite different viewpoint, which is known as the interactionist viewpoint. This interactionist viewpoint considered conflicts to be not always bad, and they said it is time that we created a dichotomy between the type of conflicts. So, one side they consider conflicts which are considered to be functional conflicts. Other side was conflicts which were considered to be dysfunctional conflicts. Now, functional conflicts are the ones which are desirable. They make the person energetic, they make the person explore different perspectives, might increase the creativity in a person, might make the person look for more solutions to a problem and a crisis. So, these were considered to be functional conflicts and they were considered to be highly desirable to have around individuals. When you talk about the second aspect, which you talk in terms of a dysfunctional type of conflict, these were the type of conflicts which were considered to be highly undesirable. Now, these conflicts, they say, are arising because there is something wrong. There is some particular aspect around the person which is not what it should be. So, these dysfunctional conflicts, the idea was that you should keep it as low as possible. Now, when you look at these type of conflicts, we can generally talk about three aspects of conflicts when you talk about this kind of a dichotomy. One is what you call as task conflict. Now, task conflict is the whatever type of work a person is doing, whatever task a person is performing, it is dealing with those aspects. The other type of conflicts is called as a process conflict. That means today if I have a goal, I have to set in a particular process or a path to approach that goal. So, both task conflict and process conflict, that means what is the nature of work which people are doing, how are the different goals, the task structured, who reports to whom, who is the boss of whom, all these are part and parcel of what you call as task conflict and process conflict. Now, both these were considered to be a part of functional conflict. Why functional? Because they are helping individuals or maybe a single individual to explore for different alternatives, to look into different viewpoints and perspectives, to restructure and redesign the things around him. So, these could be functional conflicts because ultimately it might help a person to improve his work and also the quality of his life. Now, the third aspect of a conflict which they highlighted, which came under the category of dysfunctional conflict, was what was called as relationship conflict. Whenever people are having any kind of interaction with each other, we are all social animals, so we are always having interpersonal relationship with multiple people. Now, whenever there are problems in interpersonal relationships, there are personality clashes, Maybe one is jealous or envious of the others. Some people are deliberately plotting against another person. All these are obstacles in goal achievement of a person. Now, this relationship conflict came under the category of being considered as dysfunctional conflict. So, the second concept or second perspective of conflict said that you should try to highlight and excite functional type of conflicts around you, and you should try to keep under control the relationship or dysfunctional type of conflicts. Now we come to the third viewpoint of conflict, which we call as the resolution focused viewpoint. This diverged a little away from the previous one, and it said, and it's a very valid point which they said conflicts are highly unavoidable around us, they are inevitable. You will have situations where some form of task conflict or process conflict or relationship conflict will keep coming your way at some point or the other in your life. Only thing which you have to do, you have to accept the fact that your life cannot be conflict free in a similar way that your life cannot be frustration free. And what is important, what this perspective stressed was the fact that the most important thing is that individuals should be taught and they should learn the various problem solving strategies to handle conflicts. So, even if the conflicts are desirable, even if the conflicts are good, there is a way of handling these conflicts, and these come under the category called as problem solving strategies. So, you can help a person develop these problem solving strategies. You need others to teach you. You can develop greater sensitivity towards others in your part towards solving various conflicts around you. If you look at the conflict process now, how does conflict develop? Now, conflict doesn't develop overnight. It undergoes 5 different stages. And it is very important to understand these stages, because at any particular point, at any particular stage, if you are aware the way the conflict is developing, you will be able to handle it also. So, in the conflict process, if you see, the first stage is what is called as potential opposition stage. Whenever there are problems in communication, there is mistrust, there is interpersonal problems, there are personality clashes between people, among each other. That means there is a potential that some problems can arise in this situation. Now, please remember that whenever we are talking of frustration and conflicts, we are looking at an individual in his workplace as well as individual sitting in his house interacting with family members, his extended family members, his community people living in a particular society. These kind of situation arises everywhere for us. Okay? So, the first stage is whenever some kind of problems or what you call as noises or disturbances are there in communication, lack of trust, then this can happen. So, communication is a big problem, semantic barriers are there. You say something and the person interprets it in a different manner and you wonder why did the person think about it. There could be misunderstanding and mistrust between the sender and the receiver. Yes. Communication can also arise whenever a person is using certain technical terms or what we call as jargons. Now, jargons are something which you can understand, but maybe a person who is not part of your field cannot understand. There could also be inadequate and filtered information which is being circulated. There could be obstruction or noise in the communication channels also which could result in problems. Also, situation where there is too much or too little communication, that can also result in problem. Further, there could be size and structural issues also. When there are too many people working for a particular task, too much of interdependency between people can also result in conflicts. Furthermore, when there are too many young people, where their knowledge is limited and their experience in a job is less, problems can arise. There could be ambiguities also as to what roles people can do, what are their responsibilities, what are their duties, which can also result in problem. Another source of conflict could be, these are all coming under potential opposition stage. Another thing could be when the person is, there are limited resources and they have to be shared between many people, it can result in problems. Looking at personality characteristics, higher conflicts are in cases where a person is exhibiting certain traits like disagreeableness, neuroticism, he is highly authoritative, dogmatic approach, he is a very irritable and an angry person. Whenever these things happen and they are present, chances of conflict arising become very, very high. If these stage 1 is there, stage 2 is a stage of cognition and personalization. Whenever this opposition and so many things, factors which we have just read are present around a person might start mentally thinking about it, and the moment he starts personally relating to these problems and he starts thinking in line of why me, why so and so is plotting against me, why there are people who are deliberately trying to affect my goal achievement and my other forms of attainment in life. Moment this personal touch comes to it, the person has progressed to stage 2 of conflict process. Then comes the stage 3, which is intention. Now the person knows that there are potential opposition factors around them. He is thinking about it and he is also personally reacting to him. The third stage is what are his intentions. Does he want to lie low, let it be the way it is? And whatever he plans to do will vary along 2 dimensions. Degree to which he is ready to cooperate with others and maybe be calm about the whole situation, not confront the other party, and the degree to which he is ready to confront the other person and assert his authority and his point of view. Now, this intention is also something which is happening within a person mentally. Whether he should confront the situation or should he lie low, avoid it and be absolutely calm about it. So, there are 5 stages which he can select. It could be a compromise kind of a situation. It could be a situation of competing with the other party. This is the second thing which intention of the person. He could have the third form of intention, means completely avoid the situation also. He could also have the fourth type of approach, which is accommodating, accommodate others' point of view. And also the fifth kind, which is collaboration, where he tries to collaborate with the other party. And this is, imagine, this is all happening within a person mentally. He has not actually started enacting anything. But if he has thought what he wants to do, he comes to stage 4, which is called as a behavior stage. Now, in this stage, what will be observed is certain behavior, certain reactions, certain statements being made, counter statements coming in from one person to the other person. So, this is the active 4th stage. And the final stage of conflict process is the outcome stage, where after people, the warring party, the conflicting parties have confronted each other, what is the outcome? Is the outcome functional or is the outcome dysfunctional and disruptive for it? If it's a functional outcome, it is very good. The individuals will learn to collaborate and cooperate with each other. They will be able to rethink about their outlook and the others' outlook. Basically, it will give them the luxury of time and a platform where they can share their ideas with the other party. Apart from projecting their own point of view, they are also able to understand the other's point of view. So, it might just add a component of flexibility in individuals. When the outcome has been dysfunctional, it will create further barriers in communication between people. There will be misunderstanding, there will be discontent, there will be mistrust. It will definitely reduce the level of cooperativeness and cohesiveness between people. Time, energy, effort, money will be wasted between the conflicting parties, because now the orientation is how do you cut cost with the other person, make him suffer and increase your benefits. As you can see, these kind of conflict situations are rampant around us. There are certain techniques, problem solving techniques, which we can adapt to handle these conflicts. Now, at a very, very informal level also these techniques can be adapted. So, let us see the informal way of handling the conflicts. The first in that is develop certain problem solving strategies at interpersonal level, where you are learning how to solve various conflicts face to face with another person, another department, another party with whom you have been constantly having these kind of problems. So, it is giving you opportunities to self-evaluate, to be more creative. One another way of going about is create superordinate goals and tasks. That means now you step up in terms of the level of goals which you have created in a manner in which the two warring parties, the two conflicting parties have to coordinate, have to cooperate so that goals are attained. If they both go their own way, both their goal achievements are going to suffer. So this is the concept of creating superordinate goals. Other could be expand your resources and benefits so that both the conflicting parties are able to get exactly what they need. Now this can be done only when the scope is there. The other approach could also be avoidance, whereby, which is something which is more seen in the eastern part of the world, where we just tend to avoid the conflicting situation. That is also a very healthy way of handling conflict if it's suitable to a particular occasion and a situation. The next could be smoothing, where the conflicting parties come and they downplay their differences and they try to highlight the fact that they are more similar to each other than different. Other could be compromise, where one party willingly gives way to the other party, lose certain benefits so that the other party gains those benefits. That could also be one of the policy. Other could be another way is you get an authority figure who a neutral figure, of course, who tries to iron out all the differences because he is a neutral objective person. Another way of handling at an informal level is if you know that there are certain personality traits of yourself or others which people cannot tolerate. Like I told you, people who are very authoritative, people who are rude, who are very temperamental, they can try to change their personality traits. The next approach could be redesign the task. That means change rules, regulations, policies, duties, responsibilities of individuals in such a manner that now the chances of conflicts and any kind of a problem is as low as possible. You can even bring about changes in the type of communication which you are making. You can introduce an outsider, which we said could be a person of higher authority. He comes and brings about a major differences in your handling of conflicts. All the things which we have seen so far are the conflict handling situation which can be done at a highly informal level. Now we shift to a very formalized process of conflict resolution which we call as a process of negotiation. Now whenever negotiation is happening, there are two ways in which negotiation can happen. One form of negotiation is what we call as a distributive bargaining strategy. Now this distributive bargaining strategy, as the term suggests, it's a situation where the two conflicting parties have to distribute some benefits and some resources which are fixed. So if one party gets a larger share, the other party will go out of the situation getting a lesser share. So distributive bargaining has got in that particular resolution situation, definitely one party will come out as a winner and the other party will come out as a loser. There are various issues regarding the resistance point which can be understood in this situation, but important thing to remember is that in distributive bargaining, both the parties cannot move out feeling happy together. So in the long term consequences, if you see, the long term healthy relationships are a little dicey in this situation. The second kind of negotiation process which is desirable is what you call as integrative bargaining. Now integrative bargaining situation is a situation where our target is a win-win situation. Distributive bargaining was a win-lose situation. In integrative bargaining, the target is that both the conflicting parties have to emerge victorious and they both have to share the benefits in such a manner that both feel that they have come out as winners from this situation. Now, if you look at integrative bargaining, it is a very healthy form of negotiation process. Why? Because both the parties feel that they are winners, and if both the parties have that feeling, because it's a win-win situation, ultimately it is a very desirable situation in the long term because they will maintain healthy, friendly relationships with each other. Now, when you talk about this formal conflict resolution strategy, which we are giving a term negotiation. Now, this process of negotiation, whether you decide on a distributive bargaining target and create a win-lose situation, or you decide on an integrative bargaining situation and create a win-win situation, whichever may be the target of the conflicting parties, the negotiation process is a very formalized process which undergoes couple of steps before you actually reach to a solution. The first step in negotiation process is preparation and planning for the negotiation. In this particular stage, both the conflicting parties or individuals or departments have to sit, they have to gather data, they have to gather information, as much as knowledge as possible. Now, this knowledge and this what they seek should not be restricted to only their viewpoints and their outlook. They also should seek the viewpoint and the various points which have been put across by the other party, the conflicting party. After they have done a very thorough groundwork, they come face to face on the negotiation table, and they have to set certain ground rules for the negotiation process. Now, ground rules could be as basic as deciding the time, place and duration of their meetings, and could also be a simple way of giving an understanding to each other that this is my target point, and I am not going to compromise in any way where my target point is concerned. If you are ready to listen to my viewpoint, only then we will go ahead with that. So, these are basic ground rules which both the parties have to agree upon before you come to the third stage. Now, third stage, when both the parties have given their outlooks, their point of view, the third stage is a stage of clarification and justification. So, one party is giving all their outlook, viewpoints, their demands, their aspirations, everything, their target points, their resistance points, they give it all out. So does the other party. And now, whatever clarification and justifications are needed, both the parties are giving the required clarification and justifications for their point of views. This is a stage where everything is coming out in the open, and both parties are able to understand each other's outlook and where they stand and where are the demands and where the other party stands. After this is clear, comes the stage 4, or what we call as step 4 of the negotiation process, which is the stage of actual bargaining and use of various problem solving skills. Now, as I told you earlier, bargaining could go towards distributive bargaining, it could also go towards integrative bargaining. That means they could be heading to a win-lose situation, they could also be going towards a win-win situation, whatever is the target. And any kind of problem solving strategies can be used by both the parties. Now, it has been generally shown in research that in this particular step 4, the people who are very assertive, very clear and very strongly they put their point across, that means they come out as more forceful and vocal. Generally, the benefits of which these people get is more than the benefits which people who are little submissive, little less overpowering are making. That means step 4 always gets resolved towards people who are more vocal, demanding and assertive. Now, after all this strategies have been used, bargaining has gone on, multiple meetings have happened, the last step could be a formalized written agreement, could be a verbal agreement between the two parties, but it will lead to the closure of the negotiation process. The moment it closes, and now certain strategies, certain smoothing things have been adapted by both the parties. It is important now that both the parties now abide by the decisions which have been taken, and whatever decisions have been taken, they start implementing these decisions. So, whenever any kind of conflict arises, if it is at a very medium to low to medium level, even informal conflict resolution strategies can be used. However, if the conflict becomes bigger and more than 2 individuals are involved, it could be a clash between hierarchical levels in an organization, between communities, between religious groups, it could be between departments, and it's going out of hand, then you need to adapt a formal conflict negotiation process by making both the parties undergo the 5 steps of the negotiation process. So, looking at the summary and in a nutshell, we can say that whenever an individual is meeting with certain obstacles in the achievement of his goals, he is going to be frustrated, it is unavoidable. These obstacles come in the towards a person either from within him or from people around him. Now, this presence of this frustration situation is undesirable if it persists for a very long time in an individual's life, because it starts affecting him biologically, psychologically and socially. The way the person copes with the frustration in his day-to-day life will depend upon the quality of healthy life which he is leading. This is in a nutshell what is frustration. Coming down to conflicts, like frustration, they are unavoidable. They can happen at intrapersonal level. Within a person, he is various conflicts. It can happen at interpersonal level where one person is conflicting with others. But definitely it's a situation of incompatibility, disharmony, disagreement between two people, between the hierarchical levels, two departments. It could even be a simple thing of two family members conflicting with each other. Whichever way it goes, our understanding of conflict now says that it is unavoidable. You have to accept it, and the only way to go about in life is accept the conflict situation and try to start building certain healthy problem solving strategies to cope with this conflict. Now, this could also be a way of either physically handling it, it could also be a way of emotionally handling a conflict situation. So, even if a person can avoid a conflict situation, he doesn't get angry, he doesn't get perturbed, that is also a healthy way of handling a particular form of conflict. So, it depends on person to person, people, department to department, and also the trend which exists in society and cultures. As I told you earlier, our culture, the eastern part of the world and Indian culture, does not talk about confronting people and having open conflicts with each other. Now, to resolve all this, you can have like I told you, the conflict process undergoes 5 stages. There has to be the factors which bring about conflict, which we call as potential opposition stage. The moment people start thinking about it and reacting personally, it becomes a felt conflict. Then mentally the person is going to think about his intention. What does he want to do in this particular stage? Does he want to cooperate, or does he want to be very assertive and very forceful? Whatever he decides, accordingly he will come to the 4th stage, which is the behavioral stage. And after he's enacted a particular behavior, there are certain consequences which will follow. Now, these kind of consequences which happen to a person can happen at intrapersonal level, also at interpersonal level. Coming down to conflict, final word on it, when it is a very normal level of conflict, you should try to handle in terms of your personality changes, your problem solving abilities. But if it becomes a bit too much, then definitely a formal face-to-face negotiation process has to be enforced, where the two warring parties get all the data, their viewpoints, their perspectives, their understanding on the table. There is lot of give and take, lot of bargaining, lot of clarification, lot of justification, and finally important thing is whatever decision they take, whether formally worded or verbally understood, both the parties should confront with that and also abide and implement it. Thank you so much. Hopefully the concepts of frustration and conflicts are now little more clear and understood by you, because these are two factors, psychological factors, which are unavoidable in our lives. Thank you so much.